and welcome to another episode of Data Lounge, where we try to take a little bit more of a relaxed, fun approach to data. We have a host with us that is going to scare us. So we have Andy Murphy with us. Andy, thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Fine, thank you very much. You're going to be talking to us today about some things that we should or should not do in Power BI. What do you have prepared for us today?
So today I'm going to talk a little bit about user experience, user interface. It's stuff that we don't generally think about in BI reporting. So we focus in on best practice visualizations.
Yes.
To make sure that all looks good, but we sometimes forget about the wider context.
Okay.
So user experience is more normally associated with web design.
Okay.
But there's a lot of principles that we can take into BI reporting to make our reports better, increase people using them, and increasing how easy it is to use.
Okay, perfect. So very fashionable, a little bit with user experience, digital design. This is not really what you would expect when you're working with Power BI, right? Because in other episodes, for our audience, we've spoken about some things, important things you have to do in visualization and what grouping and separating does, and we have Prathi talking to us about that. If you have not seen that, take a look in our channel. You'll find that video there. But this sounds a little bit more like a little bit more conceptual design, actually, right? Like what you do when you're designing interfaces.
So in fact, here you see, so visualization at the end there is what Prathi focused on, which is actually a really good episode. I enjoyed that.
Okay.
So UX is a bit of a wider term. So when we're thinking about user experience in a traditional web design sense, it's things how do people feel about your company or your product?
Yes.
It's influenced by loads of different factors, obviously, which we'll go through a little bit. But with BI reporting, it's more about how people feel about your product.
Okay.
And so making sure that people have positive associations with your product is easy to use. All of those are elements of user experience, which we can guide with our user interface by making sure everything's clean and good. That's the kind of thing Prathi's talking about, and that folds into really good visualization. Okay,
perfect. Understood. So we're going to be talking about user experience and user interface today.
Yes.
Okay, let's see some examples of that.
It's a really big topic, of course, so I've just picked a few little interesting bits.
Okay, good.
One thing I find really interesting is color psychology. It's actually super interesting, but we don't have loads of time, so I'm just going to keep myself really brief.
Okay.
So color perception is something that we subconsciously do. We associate colors with various different things. So on this visual here, you can see, for instance, green companies. Green tends to be like peacefulness, environmentally friendly, like health. So companies like BP use green in their logo for that.
Okay.
But green can also be energizing, which is why Monster Energy is green.
Yes.
So this is just an example of how just seeing some colors in a logo can immediately create some subconscious associations. Which is what companies hook into through their visual design.
Interesting.
Which is, of course, part of the user experience.
Interesting. I had never made the association until now. I see there the logo for Animal Planet, that is actually green. It's true. Yes, it's nature. It's green. It's right there.
Very much so. And so another really interesting one is blue, because people see, generally we think of it as a dependable color, which is why nearly every bank has blue in their logo. Most financial institutions, Facebook as well. Anybody that wants you to trust them, tends to put blue. Tends to put blue. Something important. And so when we're talking about color in BI reporting, it's often creating palettes, making sure everything looks good, and bearing in mind those associations that we have. So here we just have a few different ways of creating color palettes.
How is that thing of the color palette? Because it to me, and you probably you all know that when I'm designing or showing anything Power BI, it always looks awful, right? Because I mix colors, or I don't put enough color. It goes completely over the board and always wrong. So this palette design thing is like how to choose the colors for the visualization, or what is this? I see a lot of colors there.
There's a lot of colors. So I won't go too far into it, but basically the way our eyes perceive color
Okay.
changes whether we like certain combinations. So you have rods
Okay.
and cones in your eyes that perceive different wavelengths of light.
Okay.
So if you look at this one on the right here, this complementary palette,
Yes.
blue and yellow work well together in a color scheme because they simulate different parts of your eyes essentially.
Okay.
And so for like human perception, that looks good to us.
Okay.
And these are the various different ways you can design a palette.
Okay.
And if you try to use just picking randomly, it tends to kind of clash, look quite aggressive.
Yeah, that's what tends to happen to me. So we
Yes.
have like
not
five,
enough color is
not
always
enough
better.
color.
Yeah.
So we have like 5 ways to organize palettes, right? So there is one called monochromatic there.
Yeah, so
Can you take us through those? Because they sound like recipes to get colors right.
So a monochromatic is where you just pick one color, and then all of the other colors in your dashboard will be hues of that color. So obviously you'll
okay.
notice there's no white, black, or gray on any of these color wheels because
Yes.
those are just hues of colors.
Okay.
And then if you move more to like the analogous, then it's just using one section of the color wheel, and then you move into complementary colors.
Okay, so complementary are the ones that are on opposite ends of this color wheel, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And when you say complementary, that means that I can use any combination that is exactly opposite to each other, right? So in this wheel that we have here, I could use, I don't know, green and red in a way?
Yeah, they tend to well, actually, that's quite an aggressive color scheme, but so scientifically, that should be good.
Okay.
But which actually raises a really good point that all of this stuff is, it's quite open to interpretation. And so something that's really important is considering your audience.
Okay.
And so with certain color design, maybe some people really like red and green. Actually, Christmas colors.
Yes,
red and green
Christmas
does
colors,
work.
red and green, yes.
So it depends on what you're trying to do. But this is really interesting as well. So on the left there, we have, this is a UK sign telling you not to climb something. Red circle in the UK is usually for a warning.
Yes.
And on the right, we have what I hope is the Chinese symbol for good luck.
Okay.
It's Chinese, so I hope it is.
Okay, neither do I. Mandarin might not be on my strong languages.
But so here, red in China is considered to be a lucky color.
Oh, okay.
So they don't really have the same associations as us. So to tie this back to BI reporting, if you're
Yes.
thinking about red, amber, green, which is a very common way to traffic light positive and negative things,
Yeah.
in China that might not be as appropriate because they don't have the same association with the color red.
Okay. Yes,
and this will recur a few times. Cultural differences are really interesting in user experience.
It's amazing how the concepts that we take for granted, when we are, and obviously when we're thinking Power BI, probably for larger organizations, and with the adoption that Power BI has been having as a product, the same solution probably will end up being exposed to many different cultures. And myself, I know for a fact that I would have never thought of that red circle as a symbol for good luck. I'd say something's
Exactly.
wrong, and they're telling me, I don't know, the stop sign in Mandarin, in Chinese, to say stop, but never that it was a Happy New Year symbol.
Yeah, it is very strange. In South Africa, red is what people wear to funerals, or at least I read that online. That might not be
Okay,
true.
okay.
But I'm pretty sure it is.
Okay.
So yeah, no, definitely we really do perceive colors differently. But
Okay.
when we're thinking about BI reporting, they can actually inform a lot about our experience of the dashboard before you even start looking at numbers.
Okay.
Just the color of it.
Good.
Yeah. So the next thing I was just going to cover off
Okay.
is layout.
Okay.
Which is also really important. So, and again, something that we don't always necessarily consider. So maybe you think about making sure your visualizations look really good. Sometimes we don't think as much about how users might actually look through our dashboards and things.
Yeah.
So a lot of this work has been done by a group called the Nielsen-Norman Group.
Okay.
So they've done a lot of eye tracking studies to see how people interact. So again, we're going back to web design.
Okay.
But it will tie back, don't worry. So on the left here, these are some eye tracking images from a study. So they basically asked people to scan content from websites.
Yes.
And then they tracked the way people's eyes tend to move.
Oh, okay.
So the main way that people tend to scan for things on a web page is something called the F pattern, where people tend to scan along the top, and
Yes.
then you kind of look down a little bit to see sort of what's there, and then you kind of scan in again, making this F shape we see here.
Okay.
Now, it's kind of misunderstood. A lot of people think this is just how everybody does it, and so you should design around this. But actually, good design can change how people actually look through
Okay.
your work. So here, for example, you can see on the left, this is a Wikipedia page.
Yep.
And they asked someone to find some information from this Wikipedia page. And you can see here, they sort of did the F pattern, you can see, but they stop here on the content.
There is like a hole there on what I would expect to be the F.
Exactly, because this design is clearly a table of contents. The guy knows that's trying to find this information knows the information isn't going to be held there.
Okay.
So you just look straight past it. And in that way, design can actually change how people view things, which in BI reporting is very important. You can also have the Z pattern, or the Z pattern, which is sort of the same, but you go across, along, along. And again, that's just the way you design things can change how people look. And this is just for scanning behavior, but when you have different tasks, people start perceiving things differently again. So on the left here, this is the layer cake pattern. This is still by Nielsen Norman.
Okay.
They asked someone to find a piece of information in a large piece of text. So you can see their eyes just skip around scanning for that information that they're looking for.
Yes.
And then on the right here, we have an article from The Guardian.
Yep.
And is what's known as the commitment pattern. So this is somebody isn't scanning here, they're trying to read an article. So you can see there's almost no deviation to other bits. They looked at this advert a little bit, but mostly it's just
Its focus is all the dots and all the observations are quite packed on the main content, which is compared to the other one to the left, the layer cake pattern is I read a chunk, I skip over it, and next. So it's different ways to actually look at the content.
Definitely, and it's all about what you're trying to get out of the content, and that's why in BI reporting it's really important to consider this, because if you have, for instance, a busy CEO, he's just going to be skimming through to find those key points.
Okay.
If you have somebody who's using a Power BI dashboard for further analysis, then they're going to be much more on the commitment plan. They're going to be drilling into the data. So considering your audience, again, is super important. And just a fun cultural thing here. So the F pattern only exists in Western cultures where we read from left to right.
Yes, okay.
So in the Middle East, as you can see from this image here, they read from right to left. And
yes.
so Facebook actually, and nearly all companies, invert all of their designs. And in a follow-up study, they found the F pattern doesn't exist with Middle Eastern people.
Okay.
They have the inverted F pattern.
The inverted F pattern. So you start on the upper right hand to the left.
Exactly.
Then on the right hand up, down, and then again smaller paths right to left.
Yeah, so it's just something interesting to consider, I think. And then the last thing that we can do to make our product really good is called cognitive load. So in psychology, a cognitive load is the amount of effort it takes to learn something new.
Okay.
And in UX, it means something slightly different. It means how much mental energy you have to exert to use someone's product. Or go through someone's website, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So just have a few different topics to look at here. So mental models is something that's really interesting. So if you design things to use the same kind of things people are already used to seeing, they're going to find it easier, which seems like something really obvious.
Yes, okay.
So this is another area where we can bring this into BI reporting. So for instance, if you design things that look like a web browser, people are already really comfortable with this. So you can see here on the left, this is, I just took this from Google Chrome.
Okay.
Just screenshot of that. You always have back button on the left because you're going back. You're going forwards on the right. If you switch them around, it looks really weird. And if you gave
it's like something's wrong with that.
If you gave that to someone, they would quickly become frustrated because it's not laid out the way they expect.
Okay.
And the same at the bottom here. So the use of these mental models can make things easier for people. So this is to enable a dark mode.
Okay.
So on the left, we have a little light bulb icon, which you probably already associate with lighting something up or going dark.
Yes.
And on the right, we just have the kind of thing developers write in the back end direct mode.
A button with the label.
Yeah, which technically, it's going to work, but people are going to struggle because they're not used to seeing that sort of thing.
Okay.
And so by using these mental models and by trying to design, keeping in line with what people are generally used to seeing, it creates an easier product and it reduces that cognitive load for people to understand what they're looking at.
Okay, good.
And of course, so here's another quite obvious one. Complexity increases cognitive load. So what I've done here is I've just plot a bunch of data. So it's some sales data, and each point represents one day. And so if you just take a look at this, you might find it quite difficult to draw some insight.
Yeah, no. The answer is no.
Yeah, it's too all over the place. There's far too much data. You can't really understand what you're seeing. But if we were to just change it so we see everything at a month level instead, some granularity is lost. So technically it's less sort of specific, but you can actually just look at that and draw some conclusions really easily. So December 2014 sells really bad, for instance. And so when you're looking at this, it's so much easier for your brain to try and figure out what that message is, and that'll reduce the cognitive load for your users. And so I just got some examples from viz.wtf, which is great, and you should check it out. So these are just some horrendous visualizations that are way too complicated.
So these are basically things that we should not be doing.
Yes. You want to keep things nice and simple and straightforward. I've had a few people look at this chart on the left. Nobody can understand what it's trying to say. It's got several axes. There's lots of things going on. The text over. Way too busy. And actually, we still, around the office, haven't figured out what it means yet. Which is quite bad. Because with visualization, you want to just look at it. You want to immediately know the story it's trying to tell you. And it's the same. This one on the right is another one where the person who's done this has put a bunch of call-outs, I guess, in these little speech bubbles over the top. But actually, what it does is it just makes things more complicated because it's already
looks like
quite crowded.
It looks exactly like too many things in there.
Exactly. Whereas if it's nice and clean and simple, you direct where people are going to be looking. It just makes life easier and it makes your product better. And people will enjoy using it more. That's why if you think about the kind of really good design you see, like Apple, for instance. I don't really like Apple, but they do have great design.
It's
always very minimalist, it's very simple. And that's what it's based on. And BI reporting, exactly the same.
Should be the same. Good.
But of course, like I said, you've got to think about
the audience as well.
So this table on the left is basically I just threw everything into a big table. So this tells you a lot of information. And maybe if you're an analyst and you want to find out what's been going wrong at your company or whatever, this might be really useful. But you shouldn't give this to your CEO who just wants to know how much money have we made this year. So it's important to think. So I think in data especially, there's often a real temptation to just show everything. So it's like, we have this data, it'd be really cool to show you
just
this.
Drag and drop fields in Power BI. It supports everything. It supports million of rows. Go.
Exactly. But I think it's good to be disciplined and show as little as possible to get your point across.
Perfect.
So what I'm going to do now is we're going to do a live demo.
Good.
And so this is our list of requirements. So we're going to build a sales report. We're going to show some headline figures. So our CEO just wants to come in, look at this, figure out what's going on. We're going to show some sales. We're going to say split by region, staff sick days. So here's something I made earlier. So this is the before example.
So this is not a nice report.
This is the worst report I could make.
That's definitely the best report I could make. So this is going to be interesting if it gets better than this.
We can maybe help it out a little.
Good.
So applying all the things I've just discussed. So the first thing to think about is the colors here are insane.
Why do you say they're insane? To me, they look pretty. Why do you think they're insane?
Sometimes people put a lot of color in thinking that makes it visually interesting. That is not really the case. So because we have associations with color, here we have, for instance, there's a couple things which are in red, which people, certainly in the UK, would generally assume,
that's danger,
this is like a bad one.
Things.
This green maybe is positive. And the other thing that's slightly confusing for people is the same colors are used for completely different things. So this dark blue is fruits on this chart, but or this light blue, say office supplies, is the same as sub-Saharan Africa. And we draw these associations as the Gestalt principles that I'm proud to be talking about.
So we should be careful with colors, just to make sure, for instance, that colors represent relatively the same thing, correct? Or represent the same thing. So we create an association between color and concept behind.
Exactly. And if your color isn't giving any meaning to your data, so if you do red, amber, green, for example, then you're adding some information. If you've just changed the colors because you want it to look pretty, that's usually not a good idea.
Good.
Maybe a tip.
Ask you for a friend.
So that's we'll tackle that. Obviously, the layout is all over the place.
So the layout is not good either?
No. So generally, you shouldn't just throw everything on a page. So
okay.
Let's jump in. So
okay.
So up here
so this is a live let's make it pretty session.
We're going to
Okay, let's go through that. Let's do
might not be
prettification.
perfect, but we'll get a little better. So we got this big amber bar at the top, which again probably added for people who had this sort of thing to make it visually interesting.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is we'll turn that to a nice reassuring blue. We'll make it way smaller. Just make a nice little line there, so that'll divide our report up. So what we also have is our back button, which our user would use to navigate through the report, is down in the bottom left, which is a really random place to put it. So we're going to put that up top left because that is where it would usually be on a web browser.
Yeah, web browser thing that you were mentioning before. Okay.
And so this is a feature in Power BI, the Q&A feature.
Yes, correct.
So if you open this, obviously you can QA your data, but it being in the middle of the page gives the association that perhaps it relates to one of these three things, or it certainly doesn't relate to the whole page.
Okay.
So you're kind of, there's some associations about where it is in this layout, so I'm just going to pop it up there. Everything above the line, people tend to assume will apply to the whole page.
Oh,
so already we've just made this a little bit easier for people to work with.
Okay, fine.
These are different fonts, and also it's in purple for no reason. So we'll just...
We're making the standard now.
Yeah, we'll just make it a nice reassuring blue because we want people to feel like our report's numbers are going to be good.
Okay.
That's still slightly off. Let's just quickly change that. I don't know why it's not playing ball now.
Okay, good.
Okay, so that's fine anyway. Okay, so this chart we have here, so this is order IDs, units sold of each order ID, and how much it cost. So that's just an insane level of detail that no CEO is going to need.
That's too much data already.
It's too much data, and you can see here we've got this scroll bar because there
yes, it's a little bit long, but it's only 3 columns. Come on, is there a better way to do it? Okay, fine, let's listen to the experts.
What? It's not even in our requirements, so someone's added that because they had the data, so we just dropped that right out.
Okay.
And now with these two charts, we're seeing units sold by region and country.
Yes.
In our requirements, it's only by region, so Europe and Africa, for example. And so what we have here is these two visuals are actually showing you the exact same thing. It's just one of them is a map and one of them is a tree map, that's called.
Yes.
So we don't need two of them. That's just silly. And because we just want our CEO to be able to see how much each place has made.
Yes.
So if we were to drop out the country, that's already looking a little bit better because at least you can see how much each region has made. But tree maps aren't really that good either because our brain isn't very good at comparing areas.
Okay.
So we're just going to change that into the more boring but much better.
Wow.
Let's go this way.
Okay.
We have quite long names, so we'll leave it this way around. Let's just pop you over there for a sec. And so we also have these colors, which I mentioned. So the colors don't actually have any meaning. So what we can do is just make them all blue because there's no variation between them. So
the color does not represent something in
exactly.
itself.
So we'll just keep it nice and neutral.
Okay.
Okay, and so we also have units sold by item type in this horrendous pie chart where there's no labels. You can't tell what it is.
Okay.
So again, I'll just turn that into a nice bar chart. So we can play around with that in a sec and make that look better, but that already is better. So you can see exactly what it is.
Yes.
Okay, so sick days was another one. So what we have here is 2 gauges, which can be okay if they're used in the right way, but should be used sparingly. But so here's total profit, which is going up to an arbitrary figure, and their profit would be good. And in the sick days, obviously, you want as few as possible.
Yes, correct. That'd be absenteeism, correct?
So putting these two together is going to increase cognitive load because you're going from high as good to low as good, but you're looking at them in the same way.
Okay.
So this is going to be confusing for users. So we're just going to, that's literally all we need. And so here we have the main thing the CEO wanted was to find out our cost, profit, revenue, and units sold.
Yes, correct.
So this is in a tiny table that was in the middle when we started. So what we're going to do instead is we're just going to put these in cards as well and put these up at the top. So as I say, we can actually change people from doing the F pattern through use of design. But in this case, we don't really need to because that will be absolutely fine. People expect the most important thing to be on the top left.
Okay.
So we're going to do that. These probably won't be perfectly aligned, which obviously you would perfectly align for a proper client, but I normally spend more than 5 minutes making dashboards. So what we can do is just throw in cost there. Let's pop another one in there.
Okay.
Profit. This probably is not much of a spectator sport, I'm afraid. Units sold. And one more. As I say, you would, of course, line those up properly. So right now, already that's looking much better. So we can actually see these top headline figures. They're not hidden away anymore.
Correct.
So we can just get rid of that small, nasty table.
Okay.
So now we have, they're starting to shape up now. That's looking a little bit better. Let's just make that a bit smaller. Put that down here. So
it's cleaner. It looks
it's already a little better.
It looks cleaner.
Yeah, so let's put that out actually, so while we do this. So, and this one is showing you how much profit was made every single day.
Yes.
Which, again, is not great because it's too much information and you can't actually compare the year on year.
Yes, okay.
Because what we see here is it's plotted across
It's plotted across, yeah, it's too much data.
It's harder to compare. So what we can do instead is just put in, let's just look at months instead of date. So now we've overlaid the two.
Okay.
But it's still, it's okay. But what might be better is if we were to do something like this and put in a line to show this instead. There we go. And the labels aren't really working on this because it makes it too cluttered. So we're just going to get rid of those and leave our axes in here. So that's fine. Okay, well, we sync the axes too. We'll leave that for now. And so that's pretty good, but you might still want to drill a little further into this. So I actually did cheat slightly and make a tooltip earlier that we're just going to assign to it. So rather than increasing the clutter in the graph, we're just going to increase the cognitive load to perceive it. We just have this little pop-up, so we have some nice red, amber, green coloring about whether or not
Which we're basically applying the same concepts on those pop-ups. My pop-ups tend to be like full-blown maps, colors, tables, and everything in between. But here is basically the same. It's following what I see here is we have like the big numbers, the big important numbers on the top, and you have a clear visual indicator to say up or down, increasing or decreasing, and the number is very clean actually.
Yeah, so it's the idea is just to make things nice and easy. So when you're looking at something like when you're comparing those two things, the thing that you most want to know is, are we doing better or are we doing worse?
Wow.
And just having that little call out makes it much easier to see as compared to the old one. So already that's looking better. Obviously there'd be quite a bit more tidying up required, putting everything in the same fonts, but that's loads better. And people are going to find that much easier to use.
Yes.
And the reason that all of this matters, the reason user experience matters to us in BI reporting is, you probably know, sometimes you make something and it never gets used.
Yes.
Maybe if it's not quite fulfilling the thing people wanted it to do.
Okay.
And by having really good user experience from your product, people want to use it.
People want to use it, yeah. Absolutely.
And that is how most really successful apps are really successful. Amazon, for instance, is amazing. You know, it's got the app, it's got one swipe by, they've really thought about it. It's just really easy to use, and that's why they do so well. And it's the same for BI reporting.
Fantastic. Well, you've seen it for the very first time, a real life makeup change completely. And it wasn't that difficult. I think it was really great for us to be able to see, hey, 2, 3, 4 concepts right about how to make that user experience better and apply them in Power BI. It doesn't mean that we don't get to use all those fancy colors and tools, but the message is we need to know when to actually use them.
Exactly, yeah. Sometimes less is more.
Sometimes less is more. So Andy, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
This was definitely a big serving of humble pie. I get it now. To all of you, thank you very much for having joined us once again in Data Lounge, and hopefully we'll see you in our next episode. Take a look, there are some very interesting things on the channel. Subscribe down there. Thank you everyone, and until next time, bye.